Good morning, everybody. As we wait for you guys to file in, I'm just going to go over a few quick housekeeping rules. Thank you for joining us today. You're gonna get the diversity and inclusivity in the workplace, sponsored by Alameda County Workforce Development more today. My name is Stephanie Neely. I'm the marketing director here at CEA. While we're waiting for everybody to settle in, let's practice using the chat box. It's the single speech bubble at the bottom of the screen. Just click it open, put the name of your company in there. Let's see what industries we have with us today. All right, it looks like we have most people settled in now. Okay, so thank you again for joining us today for diversity and inclusivity in the workplace. Just a few things to note for the presentation. Your audio will be muted throughout the presentation, so we ask for your participation through the chat box and the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you have questions about the presentation, you can type them into the Q&A box, and our presenter will try to answer them as we go throughout the presentation. It's the icon with the two speech bubbles at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The handouts for this presentation were attached to the reminder that was sent out. If you didn't receive them, please let me know in the chat box and I'll make sure you get a copy of those. If you experience any other technical difficulties, you can reach out to me in the chat box and I can help you troubleshoot. Because your feedback is very important to us, please complete the survey at the end of this presentation by accessing the QR code. Just snap a quick photo with your phone. The survey won't take more than a couple minutes to complete, and we use your feedback to constantly improve on our presentations. This presentation will be recorded and will be available on the Alameda County Workforce Development Board's website after the presentation. Your speaker today is Eli Nunez. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eli.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be presenting for Alameda again. Looking forward to sharing some information with you. First of all, though, I'd like to start by thanking the Alameda County Workforce Development Board and notify everybody we do have a hotline for employers in conjunction with Alameda County. Basically, it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. You can give us a call at 888-202-5668 and give us a call with any questions you have about any HR related topics, whether it's hiring and firing employees, anything in the employee life cycle, paid sick leave. We still have a lot of questions about paid sick leave and all the changes that took place, FMLA, CFRA, breaks and lunches, employee handbooks, harassment prevention, or remote workers. Anything you have a question about, give us a call. We'd love to help you with any kind of human resource related question. With that, a little bit more about us. Again, I'm Eli Nunez. I'm with California Employers Association, and our goal is to provide our members and our callers peace of mind. We do that by providing exceptional human resource solutions, training and recruiting services, webinars such as this one, and then quick answers to any HR question, whether it's on the hotline I just mentioned, email, or even during these presentations. We also provide employment forms, fact sheets, trainings, different things. Basically, what I like to say is let us help you carry the burden of the human resources function of your industry or your organization so you can worry about everything else, which there's a lot going on. And with all the changes that happen with laws and regulations in California, let us be a resource. Let us help you with those. Speaking of laws in California, though, one thing we do like to clear up is that even though we do have people on our team with legal experience, we are not a law firm, we are not lawyers, and this presentation or any information we give should not be relied upon as legal advice. We always recommend if you have any questions or issues of a legal nature, you contact your legal counsel to get any advice on that. So again, we're not a law firm. We don't dispense legal advice. Everything we present or information we give should be taken from an educational perspective. We talk about some regulations, laws, acts that pass, that sort of thing. But again, we are not giving any kind of legal advice. Now that the fine print's out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into our topic of the day. So today we'll talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, some of the definitions of it, DEI, why it matters for small businesses. We'll also talk a little bit about why it's become so controversial recently, right? Why it's become almost like a dirty word. People don't want to talk about it, but let's talk about what it means to your business or your organization and why it's important. discuss a few strategies to create an inclusive culture, and how you can plan to have that diverse and inclusive workplace that everybody hopefully strives for. So, one thing to think about, and we always recommend that every person that's a leader of the organization, maybe a part of it, is consider, does your company encourage diversity, equity, and inclusion? And this is something that we recommend that you think about as a leader in your organization, but also ask your employees, ask everybody down the line, how they feel about the organization as a whole. Do they feel it's diverse? Do they feel that everyone's treated equally? Do they feel everybody's included? And by getting those responses, you could see, are we moving in the right direction, or are we in completely different pages? Because sometimes as leaders, we think that, hey, we're creating this great organization, we're inclusive, we got all these programs going to make sure everybody feels part of the organization. But for some reason, what we're putting out there doesn't trickle down to the workforce. So it's always important to get the pulse of the organization, right? Ask them, find out, ask on a regular basis, have those conversations, have those open door policies to where your employees can come to you with any concern, any suggestion, or any ideas in order to increase that diversity in the workplace. So to start, let's talk about what is diversity as a whole. We That's the D in DEI, and everyone talks about it. Everyone, we've heard the terms before, but what is diversity? And what it comes down to is diversity is really our differences in racial, ethnic, gender, socioeconomic, and geographic backgrounds, right? It's what differentiates us from each other. And the thing to keep in mind is that, it's not just always where we're born or how we're raised, but it could also be things like our religious beliefs, sexual orientations, life experience, all those things. And as you can see from this graphic, the way we like to describe it is diversity is kind of like the mix that makes us who we are. So it's kind of like we're making a pastry or a cake. You have all kinds of different ingredients that go in there to make the final product. And if you vary the quantities of those different ingredients a little bit, or leave something out, or add something that's not in there, you're going to get a whole different product at the end of the day. Different taste, different texture, whatever it is. It's the same thing with diversity, right? It's all the different ingredients that make us the individuals that we are. Another way to look at it too is there's different layers to those differences or that diversity. And if you look at it, the very core of it is our personality. So you could have people, that are the same race, same, gender, same, you know, same appearance, whatever it is, that work in the same place, but their personalities can be different and can make them different people, right? So we look at things like how open they are to suggestions, how conscientious they are. Are they extroverts or introverts? That sort of thing. That personality is kind of going to determine the kind of person, the kind of workplace that you have. The next level is what we call the internal dimension. So that's things like age, gender, sexual orientation, physical ability, ethnicity, or race. Something that you're kind of born into, perhaps. That also plays a role. As we move out of this graphic, we have the external dimension, so things that maybe we can have some kind of effect on, or some things that we can somewhat change. So geographic location. We could be born in one place, but we could move somewhere else and get immersed in that culture a little bit. Our income, that's something that could vary based on our decisions, and things that we could change. Our personal habits or recreational habits, religion, educational background. These are things that we can have an effect on, that we can change as we move through our lives. Appearance, parental status, marital status, that sort of thing. These are all decisions that we consciously make in one way or another that has an effect on these things. And finally, on the outside, we have organizational dimension. So this is where our workplace comes into play. What do we belong at in the organization? Where do we fit in there? And this could be things like our classification. What work group are we in? What field do we work on? Are we part of a union? Have we been with the company for a while? Or even, where do we work? Where's our location? Do we work remotely, or do we work on site? All these things are part of who we are as an employee and as a coworker. Another way to look at diversity too, and this is one that kind of speaks more towards the importance of it in the workplace. And this is a quote by Tina Rasmussen that states, diversity is the mosaic of people who bring a variety of backgrounds, styles, perspectives, values, and beliefs as assets to the groups and organizations with which they interact. And that's an important line, that last part, assets to the group and organizations. So if we look within an organization, everybody that's either a coworker or on our team or that we hire doesn't always have the exact same backgrounds, the exact same education, the exact same work experience. And that should be seen as a benefit because you take people with different experiences, that worked at different fields or have different levels of education or different sources of education, you're going to have a whole lot of different ideas that's going to help you solve different problems. And as leaders, it's our responsibility to help all these differences mesh together to get the most out of the group, to use it as an asset rather than to have chaos and everybody arguing with each other, right? So again, that diversity, it's important because it's going to bring a lot of different viewpoints, different experiences, and different things to our organization that could benefit us at the end. Now, when we talk about diversity too, it's also important to talk about inclusion. And what inclusion does is basically it brings together all the different diverse forces in a way that's beneficial to everybody, right? So the way I like to describe it is diversity is opening the door to different people, different backgrounds, different abilities to come in, whether it's to apply or to come work or whatever it is. Inclusion, though, involves getting rid of some barriers that would prevent them from becoming fully involved with the organization. So in other words, it's not enough to say, well, hey, we I'll give you an example. We're a auto repair shop, and all our mechanics are men. So what we're going to do is we're going to, hire a couple of women mechanics and put them in the mix because we believe in diversity. And that's fine, but when they come into work, if you have a very cliquey workplace or you have things in place that don't really allow them to really get involved with everybody else or to have the same opportunities as everybody else, ultimately that attempt at diversity is going to fail because you're not going into the next step. You're not putting that diversity into action by creating that environment where everybody can get involved, everybody's respectful, and everybody can connect with everything else. So you can see the graphic. I mean, inclusion just means making that mix work, taking all those people with diverse backgrounds and different experiences, and making sure that they mesh and they can work together to make your organization stronger. So some elements of what we call elements of belonging, and these are important when we're talking about equity, is making sure that your employees feel seen at work. And what we mean by seen is not just, visually you see them and you move on. It means that we recognize what they're doing. We recognize their work, they're respected by their colleagues, and we acknowledge the fact that what they are doing is important to the organization, important to our overall goals. That's what we mean by being seen. It's not just being seen by knowing, oh, hey, we're taking attendance, we know that person's here or that person's not here. Being seen means we recognize the person, their achievements, their experience, and we offer them the respect that they deserve based on those things. Being connected or connectivity is also very important. A lot of times we talk about, do you have a friend at work or a best friend at work? And that doesn't mean that you have someone that, that's your bestie like you have outside of work or that you have at school that you tell all your secrets to and you go hang out on a regular basis. What that means is do you have people at work that you feel comfortable interacting with? You have good social interactions with them, even if it's just in passing, in the break room, in the lunchroom, in the cubicle next to you. you know do you feel connected enough to where you can have certain conversations with people, even if they're conversations about work? Do you feel that you can have open conversations with them? You can have social interactions with them, whether it's peers, managers, or senior leaders. That's why it's important, again, having that open door policy, but also having that atmosphere where people feel comfortable interacting with each other and building those connections. Feeling supported, again, also very important. Basically, being supported doesn't mean that there's always somebody there to back up our decisions or to tell us that we're always right. But being supported means that there's somebody or a system in place that always gives us what the resources that we need to get our job done. So again, it's not just about taking down those barriers, but it's also about making sure that we have everything we need to accomplish our tasks or our goals. And finally, being proud of the organization. And usually, if you're in an organization where you feel seen, connected, and supported, it's easier to feel proud of being a part of the organization you're a part of. You feel that you're all working towards the same goal. You feel that the vision and the values of the organizations are aligned with yours, or you're aligned with theirs. So that way, you talk up the organization. Hey, this is a great place to work. I don't dread going to work every day. I actually look forward to it. I feel that we're accomplishing great things, or that the work we do is important. So if you have those four elements, it's more likely you're going to have a very, very happy employer or employee base. Now we talked about diversity and inclusion. Let's talk about equity, the E and DEI. And that again, we talked about inclusion being tearing down those barriers that don't let people be able to fulfill their potential. Equity is providing support based on specific needs. And that basically means giving everybody fair access or equal opportunity to resources and being able to thrive, right? Having an environment of respect and dignity where everybody can do their best and give their best. And this graphic, I think, is very important because a lot of times when we talk about DEI, a lot of people say, well, we give everybody the same chance. Everybody has the same opportunity. And if they don't make it, that's because of them. That's understandable. Many people look at it that way, but it's also important to realize that certain people maybe need some kind of support in order to accomplish things, right? I mean, it's equity is different from equality in that, it doesn't mean just providing the same resources to everybody. With equity, we're looking to each employee and knowing that maybe they have different access to resources, different privileges, different opportunities in the past that maybe affect what they can do now. So if there's some things that we can do to maybe level that playing field, that's why it's important to have in place. So for instance, some examples of this would be, say, job descriptions, for example. Maybe not everybody has access to a computer system where they can access things online. So maybe being able to provide different avenues where people can access job descriptions is very important. Or when it comes to hiring, and this is something that I think a lot of places gotten away from. But back in my day, if you will, when it came time to hire somebody, we just looked at their education. Where'd they get their degree? And if it was like a big name university or college, there was more of a chance that we jump on that person and pass on other people. So that's where it's important to maybe when we're hiring, look at skills, look at experience, not just education, perhaps, because as you know, not everybody has the same access to education. Not everybody is maybe a legacy student that could get into those large universities or has the financial means to do so. But that doesn't mean that they could be any less talented or well equipped to the job. So looking at skills, looking at experience is very important as opposed to just looking at, where this person went to school or, things like that. And of course, giving equal access to all employees. And that means access to materials, resources, and opportunities and adequate accommodations, right? So a lot of times you think, well, why should I make exceptions for people? It's not about making exceptions. We look at our job descriptions, we look at what the essential duties of the job are and what's necessary to perform those essential duties. And if there's some minor duties that maybe cannot be performed, then we make that decision. Is this as important to the job, or is this something that we can, maybe shift around or make accommodations for, right? So again, I mean, it's making sure that you have those resources in place for employees that maybe need some kind of have some kind of need or accommodation or anything. You have those resources in place already, so you make them accessible to everybody, whether they need them or not. Now, some reasons why diversity and inclusion and equity matter. And again, it's easy to get carried away when we look at media, the news, social media, whatever it is, talk about DEI is negative to the workplace, or we have a lot of large industries, large companies, certain car makers talking down about DEI and how it's harmful to an organization. However, I mean, when we look at these stats, you know, we look at some of the reasons why diversity is so important and can be beneficial to an organization. So, Deloitte did a survey and found that 20%, or there could be a 20% enhancement in innovation by having a diverse team in place. And going a little further beyond that, if you're looking at the candidate pool, we're looking to fill some positions. 76% of job seekers look at diversity as an important factor when considering employment opportunities. So in other words, these candidates, these newer generations hitting the workforce, they're not just looking for a paycheck. They're looking to see, is this an organization that I want to be a part of? Is this that organization diverse? Is it providing an equal opportunity for everybody? Does it align with my values? So 76%. If you're not putting an emphasis on diversity and equity in the workplace or inclusion in the workplace, that's a big portion of the talent pool that you could be missing out of. Okay? As far as employees leaving the workplace, 72% stated they would leave a job for one that is more inclusive. And this was by a survey conducted by Glassdoor. And finally, the percentage of Generation Z that are consider themselves racially or ethnically diverse is 48%. So, again, if you have 48% of the workforce that considers themselves racially or ethnically diverse, and they're looking at workplaces, again, they want to see one where that diversity is welcome and that inclusivity is a big part of the culture because, again, it's going to help them feel like they belong there and they have a place in that organization, not just in the short term, but possibly in the long term. So, more benefits of DEI again, greater innovation and problem solving. As I mentioned earlier, you get people from different backgrounds, different experiences. You're going to get a whole lot of different ways of looking at things. So, sometimes, it's important to have both the perspective of somebody that's got that, you know, 4, 5, 6 years of higher education versus somebody that's been in the workforce for 10 or 20 years already. You want to get both of those perspectives when you're dealing with a new problem, a new project, or a new way of doing things. Another benefit, welcoming a broader customer base. If you have somebody from a different background that walks into an organization and sees somebody in there that's similar to them, they basically see themselves in your organization, that is going to make them feel more welcome. That's something that many of us have experienced. We walk into whether it's a place of business or organization, and we see people like us, or people like friends that we know, or that sort of thing. That makes us feel more welcome, more open, and probably more apt to do business with them in the future. Employee engagement can also increase if you have an organization that puts emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. Again, employees are going to feel seen, they're going to feel welcome, they're going to feel supported, so they're going to be more engaged in the workplace. And as we know, engagement does lead to higher retention. So when we talk about things that have happened the past couple of years, like the Great Resignation and all the turnover that happened, and everything, it's important to put that emphasis on how can we retain those employees? How can we stop that brain drain from having our employees go to either competitors or just leave the industry altogether? Well, this is a fairly simple way or a fairly easy way to make sure that we are engaging and retaining that talent. And again, as I mentioned, attracting top talent, when you have these new generations considering themselves ethnically diverse or diverse in other ways and looking for a place to work, if they see an organization that welcomes diversity, promotes inclusion, that can be the deciding factor as to whether they go to your organization or somewhere else. So again, keep in mind, it's a great tool for attracting top talent, and finally, positive brand reputation. There's been a recent study that says 2 out of 3 Americans choose to support businesses that align with their values. Now, as we mentioned, with that newer generation being more focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, having that as part of our business model, part of our goals, is going to attract more of that younger customer base or more of that customer base and give us a good brand reputation as well. So when we talk about some of the barriers to having that diverse workplace or inclusive workplace, one of the top ones that comes to mind is our bias. And one thing we like to talk about is unconscious bias. And basically what unconscious bias is, it's our automatic response where we make quick judgments about something, whether it's people, situations, whatever it is, based on our experiences or the way we see things. Now, bias in itself, I mean, basically, it's not something that we plan to do. It's usually when we talk about unconscious bias, it's just an automatic reaction that we have to something. And again, it could be because we've had a similar experience in the past, or someone told us about certain things and stuck with us, or the way we grew up or why we grew up. All those things that shaped us can help us or can make us jump to those conclusions. Doesn't mean we're a bad person, doesn't make us a bad person. It just means that, that's just how we make sense of things because that's what made sense to us in the past. Unfortunately, I mean, one thing that can lead to is, blind spots. We're going to automatically disqualify somebody or jump to a conclusion based on that past experience. That's why it's important to recognize it and keep that in the back of your mind, see what we can do. Now, the difference between unconscious and conscious bias is usually that unconscious bias is unintentional, right? Conscious bias is when we know we're prejudiced or when we know we prefer something else. It's like, well, our entire workplace, I'll go back to the auto mechanic shop, our auto repair shop. Our entire workplace is all men, so we like hanging out and playing cards afterwards, or playing whatever basketball after work. So we're just going to hire more men because we're more comfortable. That's a conscious bias there, but unconscious is something that we're unaware of. We're unaware of those prejudices or preferences, and even though we think we're being fair, that's not always the case because those unconscious biases tend to creep in. And it could be, different things. I mean, if we're looking at, say, we're looking at a resume and we come across somebody's name, it's, some hard for us to pronounce or something, maybe we unconsciously just put that at the bottom of the pile. Doesn't mean that we're prejudiced against, whatever that person is. It's just, it's difficult for us, so we're just going to set aside because it's too different from everything that we know. So, if you're ever curious about, hey, do I have unconscious bias or what is my level of bias? Harvard University has developed a way to test your bias, is what they call it, to give you a score. You go to www.implicit.harvard.edu, take that test, and it'll kind of give you a little bit of insight. Interesting things there. I mean, a lot of times there's things that we don't even realize that are getting in the way that pop up. So again, you know, some things to avoid when we want to eliminate bias in the workplace is don't always look for yourself in others. In other words, if we're hiring people, don't look for somebody that's always exactly like you. And that's important because it's human nature. We like being around people that are like us, that have the same likes, that have the same interests, same backgrounds perhaps, because it's comfortable. Again, it's human nature, it doesn't make us bad people, but it's important to recognize that and know that that's not always what we're looking for. Don't make that a determining factor when we're hiring somebody. Slow down when we're making decisions, whether it's hiring or whether it's employment-based decisions. A lot of times we like to rely on our gut instinct, and many times our gut's right. It's always we always say you go with your gut, right? Well, don't always go with that. It's okay to question that sometimes. Take your time, slow down your decisions, get more information, ask them questions, or consider alternatives. I mean, sometimes, you know, we hear about different things out there. I mean, we hear about millennials that don't have work ethic, right? Is that always the case? let's consider the alternative. Let's look around. Let's see for ourselves to see if these things are true. Quick example for you, and this is something I alluded to earlier. What can happen when we have that bias in the workplace? So in this case, we have Eric and Brianna, and Eric interviewed Brianna, who's a woman, and Jerry, who's a man, for a position in sales. Brianna had extensive experience in sales and interviewed very well. Meanwhile, Jerry had never worked in sales before. However, Eric instantly clicked with Jerry. In the interview, Eric and Jerry realized they had similar interests, including playing basketball on the weekends. Eric selected Jerry for the position because he felt Jerry was simply a better fit. Eric thought about how many of the male employees got together to play basketball on the weekends, and Jerry would fit right in. Now, Eric thinks diversity in the workplace is important, so why didn't Eric select Brianna? Any thoughts, anybody? Do you guys think he made the right decision? Or did we go astray there? Did that unconscious bias creep in? What do you think? Throw something in the chat or in the Q&A for me if you like. I think in this case, what do you think? And I think it's something that, we see a lot when we're hiring or interviewing or even promoting within the organization, right? And this goes back to what I mentioned, not always looking for yourselves in others. I mean, Eric, saw Jerry and saw a lot of the same interests. Hey, likes to play basketball, and think about, hey, all the males play basketball on the weekends, and you know, that's he would fit right in. Let's get him in there. We could train him up. It's not a big deal, right? Meanwhile, though, Eric passed on Brianna, who's got extensive sales experience, who's got experience in the field, who could hit the ground running. Now, something else to consider here too. If Eric were to select Brianna, do you think she'd fit into this organization? I think given the facts that we have with this, I mean, about how all the guys get together and play basketball on the weekends, do you guys think maybe some shop talk happens on the weekends? More than likely it does. I mean, it's probably a lot of, playing around, talking about basketball or whatever else, but I'm sure some shop talk happens. So if Brianna were to come work there but not take part in that, she'd be missing out or being left out or excluded from some of the team building that happens there and possibly some of the information sharing that happens there. So again, a couple things to consider in this scenario, right? One, I mean, the unconscious bias crept in and he hired somebody that had the same interests as him, right? Said, hey, this person plays basketball like us, he'll fit right in with the guys. But the other thing is, look at the organization as a whole. Is the culture really open or inclusive to somebody that's not interested in basketball, not one of the guys? And if that's the case, we're missing out on what 50% of the population as potential candidates. So something to consider there. Next thing we'd like to keep in mind, when we're talking about unconscious bias or stereotypes or those sort of things, some popular cultural sayings that we have or little sayings that have floated around our environment from time to time. One we have is blank has more fun. I think the popular saying is always blondes have more fun. Is that always the case? No, not necessarily. I've met plenty of brunettes that, you know, people that aren't blonde that have a lot of fun. I have no hair. I have plenty of fun. So that sort of thing. It's just, an old stereotype that's floated around. Certain people are good at math. Some people say male. Some people say people of certain ethnic background are better at math with others. Same with sports. Some people think that certain genders or certain people of ethnic backgrounds are better at sports than others. Is that always the case? Absolutely not. Again, but we're making those generalizations. We're looking at the group as a whole based on some of our limited experience as opposed to looking at individuals. Same things when we talk about who's more emotional, men, women, children, adults, certain ethnic groups, certain whatever it is. It's easy to make that generalization, but again, not always true. And thinking in this in broad scope and seeing everybody through the same lens can kind of have us jumping to those conclusions, right? So it's always important to question those things. Yeah, we've got these popular sayings or popular thoughts or stereotypes or whatever that have floated around our culture for a while. but they may not always be true. So, a few stats for you on how bias impacts the workplace. And we've talked about it a little bit, but in the hiring process, and this is an old 2017 survey, found that white Americans are 36% more likely than black Americans with the same credentials to get a callback. Is there other issues at play there? There could be, but the fact of the matter is that is a pretty dramatic stat. Same with retention. Employees who perceive bias at work are more than 3 times as likely to say they're planning to leave their current job. This from the Center for Talent Innovation. And that makes sense. Think about some of your past workplaces. If you felt that things weren't fair, that you weren't being treated fairly, or that other people were being favored instead of you for no better reason than they were liked more or whatever it is, yeah, you're probably looking for a better opportunity. Now, when we talk about advancement, 80% of the 1.1 million people left the workforce in 2020 were women. That's back in 2020. So we're thinking about the pandemic hitting, thinking about, you know, responsibilities or duties or things that arose at home. They impacted a lot of women basically adversely and unfairly, really. So, again, you think about that, now things are getting more or less back to normal. You got 80% of that 1.1 million people left the workforce that kind of had to put their careers on pause for a while, putting them at a disadvantage. So how do we address these things? I mean, something you can do to remove bias from the hiring process. Don't consider names and photos on the resumes. As I mentioned earlier, look at experience. Look at work experience, look at skills, look at whatever. Use the same criteria to evaluate everybody. And finally, cast a wider net. Recruit from different sources, colleges, organizations, whatever it is, to get that full spectrum of candidates. Don't limit yourself to just the top 2 or 3 colleges or the local 2 or 3 colleges in your area or whatever. Cast a wider net. That's going to get you a more diverse pool, different viewpoints, and make your organization stronger as a whole. So, again, also when you're looking to hire people, a lot of times we fall into the trap of thinking, well, we'll hire somebody for the culture that fits the culture of the company, and then we'll train them up on the other skills later. Yeah, I mean that makes sense in theory, but if you think about it, if we're hiring somebody that we think fits in culturally, basically we're just hiring somebody that's a reflection of who we are, and that could lead to excluding some people of other genders, people of other races, religions, etc., etc. So again, it's not just about that cultural fit. It's important, but there's got to be a different way to look at it, not just who looks like us, who is like us. Let's look at the skills, let's look at the talent, let's look at how different ways they could fit into the organization and different ways we can open up the organization so more people fit in. So again, I mean, ways to avoid that, let's take note of the similarities we share with the candidate and differentiate between the attributes that could cloud our judgment. So for the example that we had earlier, I mean, it's great that, talk about playing basketball came up during the interview and that sort of thing. That's a great conversation piece of the interview. Let's move that aside though. Don't let that completely cloud your judgment and be the deciding factor. So some other inclusive hiring practices you can use: avoid using words that convey stereotypes, using inclusive words, avoid masculine nouns and pronouns. And this is not just in job interviews, but I'm talking about job descriptions, I'm talking about job postings, that sort of things. Writing concise job announcements. Let's make that job announcement about what we're looking for. What are the essential skills? What experience do we want? If we're looking for education or a certain level of education, why? Is it essential to the job? Is it necessary for the job? It could be, or it could just be something that we've always done it that way. So why not keep doing it? Well, let's take a look. Let's be concise about it. Let's state our company's purpose and values because just as we are looking for candidates, our candidates are looking at us to see if we're going to be the right fit for them, as well as our company's commitment to diversity and inclusion. And again, it's not just a statement. We have to make sure that we are practicing it. Other things to look out for in the workplace. And these are things that, we have to look out for in ourselves as leaders, as managers, but also within our workforce, within our coworkers, within our, you know, everybody else in the office, right? These are micro messages. And that's basically signals we send each other through our behavior. Not really things that we say or always things that we say. It could be smaller messages, just little things, maybe the way we look at somebody or the way we sit next to somebody or that sort of thing. But again, think of the impact that they have. Microaggressions, those are those brief exchanges that send a message that makes somebody feel like they don't belong. Maybe it's things we say or the ways we act about somebody. Micro inequities, those are messages that we send to people that cause them to feel slighted, discouraged, or excluded. And then there's micro affirmations. Those are, little messages or little actions that make people feel valued, included, or encouraged. So when we talk about inequities, I mean, it could be something that we're doing unconsciously. We won't even think about it. So, for instance, if we're having a meeting, maybe we're taking more questions from men than women. They're all raising their hand equally, but we're picking more of the men to answer to ask questions. Why are we doing that? Are we doing that? Be conscious of that next time you have a meeting or next time you have a round table or something. Confusing people of a certain ethnicity with another person of the same ethnicity. I mean, how embarrassing is that? So again, look at everybody as individuals. Don't just cluster everybody into specific groups and think that they're all the same. Consistently mispronouncing a person's name. If you hire somebody, you have a coworker, and you're not sure how to pronounce that name, ask them. Ask them. Don't just, don't just take a guess and go with it. I guarantee you that person will not be insulted. It's happened to me. So just make sure that we are doing it right. And once we got the right way to pronounce that name or the right way to talk to that person, let's stick with it. Continually interrupting somebody makes them feel like, hey, I'm going to interrupt you because I'm more important than you are. What I have to say is more important than what you have to say. Instead of that, let's look at micro affirmations, asking others for their opinions. If you ask everybody for their opinions, again, they feel included. They feel like they belong. They feel like they're valued. They feel seen. Recognizing others' achievements, how important is that? How good do we feel when somebody recognizes our achievement at work? Friendly facial expressions and gestures. And finally, taking a genuine professional interest in somebody's personal life. Now, that doesn't mean that you're asking 20 questions and prying into people's personal life. That just means that, you're making that chit chat, that conversation. You care about them as a person enough to find out what's going on with them. Right? So, things to think about. If we have unconscious bias and stereotypes, how do we address them? That's again something to ask yourselves as leaders or as coworkers or as recruiters or whatever it is. How do we address that unconscious bias and stereotypes? And we talked about a few different ways to do it, but again, let's look at our practices. Maybe take a step back, look at our workforce or our past practices that we've done, and see what led us there. How do we address those things? All right, now let's talk about creating an inclusive, equitable, and respectful workplace. That respect is so important. And it's important. I mean, a part of creating that people first culture is building a foundation of trust and respect among our employees. We want our employees to respect each other and trust each other. Do they always have to like each other? No, we're human. We don't always like each other, but it's important to make sure that we have that trust and respect. We know what to expect from people, and we know that it's going to be respectful. So, things to look out for. When we talk about toxic work environments or toxicity in the workplace, incivility and disrespect. If you have a workplace where people are constantly talking down to each other, disrespecting each other, huge, huge trouble spot, huge no-no. Non-inclusive environment, unethical behavior, very competitive, very cutthroat. People are undercutting each other, making each other look bad in order to move up. That's going to lead to trouble. Or finally, bullying at work. I mean, think about these things in and of themselves. You could look at them and say, well, that's just misbehaviors, that's maybe policy violations. But if left unchecked, any of these behaviors can lead to claims of harassment or discrimination that can be very, very troublesome for an organization. So to keep a lookout for those signs. When you see these things, let's address them. Because as managers or as leaders, let's think about it. If you see a problem and it's a very small problem right now, we want to address it before it just keeps growing and growing and growing and completely poisons our entire workforce. So again, if you see any signs of, somebody behaving unethically, let's address it right away. Somebody disrespecting their team members, let's pull them aside. Let's have that meeting. Let's correct that right away. Put a stop to it. Same with bullying at work. Put a stop to it as soon as you're aware of it. So ways we go about building that foundation of respect. First thing is recognizing we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different points of views. We're all individuals. Recognize people as individuals and make sure that we're giving them the ability to use those differences. And we're making the most out of those things, right? Making the most out of those different experience or what everybody else brings to the table, making sure that the organization as a whole is benefiting from it. And again, consistency. I think that's one thing that I always try to drill home when I'm talking to managers or supervisors. Being consistent and treating everybody the same. Whether you like the person or not, whether they've caused trouble in the past or not, we want to be consistent. Because as managers, as supervisors, leaders, that makes our life so much easier. If we're always consistent, people know what to expect from us. People will know they're in trouble before we tell them if they do something wrong. And again, people will always know what our expectations are. There's no, shifting ground underneath people, so they always know what to expect. And again, listening and avoiding overreacting. It's a very, very hard skill to master as a leader too, because sometimes, something goes sideways. We just want to react right away. But it's very important to listen and let your team know that they can come to you with any problem, mistake, whatever it is. So, as an individual, some things we can do using our best judgment. Don't normalize bias. If we see it as part of our organization, let's see how we can address it. Show yourself to be an ally through actions. Now, that's a tough one because when we think about ally, we think of somebody that's always, always have some taking somebody's side or always fighting the fight with somebody else. That's not what we mean by being an ally. Being an ally, we mean you're someone that people can go to with a concern, with an issue, whenever whenever they need help with something. That's being an ally. It's somebody that's going to treat them consistently, give them an honest answer, and yes, if they need help, you may be someone that helps them with it. Doesn't mean that you're always taking their side, whether they're right or wrong. It means that you're somebody that's considered to be by them to be open or safe to approach with issues. Always speak for yourself and always ask people how you can be supportive. Sometimes when people make mistakes or are in the wrong, they still need support to get back on the right path. So we want to make sure that we are able to do that. So something else to keep in mind too, if you are going to be that ally or that person that people go to, we have to be able to communicate respectfully. And that involves active listening. So things we want to make sure of is before we jump to any conclusion, we're always getting as much of the facts as possible. And that includes, asking the questions, right? Sometimes people want to come to us with an issue or something. It's always important to ask those questions, get the full story, and listen. You know, if someone's coming to us with an issue, we want them to communicate their side to us, them do the talking, and we're just asking those questions to draw more information out to get the whole picture. Okay? Again, this means we're not interrupting them, we're not finishing the story for them, we're not finishing, whatever it is for them. We're actively listening, showing interest, you know, whether it's making that eye contact, sitting at attention to them, or staying focused on them. That's where maintaining that positive body language comes in. Someone has something important to tell us, or important to them to tell us, make sure that you are present in the moment and actively listening. Now, you may find yourself, as many of us do, that sometimes, you may cross the line or say the wrong thing, whether it's because of our bias or whether it's, we get carried away or we're joking around or, maybe it's the wrong room, right? Maybe we say something and it's mixed company or whatever it is, we cross the line. So what do we do? Well, important thing to keep in mind is we're all human. So we're going to remember not everyone always thinks the way that we do, right? So we always ask, the first thing you can do is don't put yourself in that position. If there's controversial subjects, that sort of thing, politics, religion, whatever, maybe best not to talk about them at work, right? Watch what we do and listen more than we talk. However, if you're beyond all that and you do stick your foot in your mouth, hey, we all make mistakes. Let's own up to it. Let's apologize. Let's do what we can to correct the issue. And again, if we do recognize that we said something wrong or we crossed the line, it's very important that it's not just an apology and we move on. We're going to apologize and do what we can within ourselves to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because if it happens again and we apologize again and it happens again and we apologize again, guess what? At that point, that apology is worthless and it's just become a habit. So make sure if we realize that we have an issue, we're in the wrong, we're doing something to correct it. So from a organizational perspective, when we're talking about inclusive work culture, let's make sure we have a safe space. Make sure we have a place where people can communicate with us, whether it's our office, whatever it is. Make sure we have a place where people feel free to come and voice their concerns with us. And that could include things like, what do our meetings look like? Are they wide open for everybody? Is everybody getting the equal opportunity to express their thoughts or their ideas? Or are we in an environment where as soon as somebody says something, five other people jump up and try to shoot it down? So it's up to us to, as people running that meeting, to encourage that inclusive meeting, that inclusive work environment, rewarding and recognize everybody's performance. Again, remember, we want people to feel seen, to know that we see them in the organization, and have frequent check-ins. I mean, meet people where they want to be. For example, in our organization, some of us meet with our managers once a week. Some of us meet with them once a month. And they're comfortable with that because we're very clear on their expectations and they meet us where we need to be. So same thing, look at what those frequent check-ins are. Do people want to talk every day, once a week, once in the morning, and that's it? Kind of meet people where they are and come up to the happy medium to accomplish both or to meet both of your needs. Now, when it comes to creating a DEI strategy for organization, like to use these guidelines. The first one to keep the values, vision, and mission of the organization in mind. So again, that DEI strategy should align with the mission of the organization. Because if they clash in any way, it's not going to work. One thing's always going to take precedent over the other. Get feedback from your stakeholders, and that's everybody, employees, owners, managers, clients, possibly, whatever it is. Get that feedback, Do we have an inclusive organization or not? Do you feel our organization welcomes diversity? Ask that question. It's a tough question to ask because sometimes it's a tough answer to get, but it's important to know where we stand. Work with others to create your DEI strategy. Again, this isn't something we can create in the vacuum in the boardroom and just roll out and expect it to be, you know, 100% foolproof and solve all our problems. We want to make sure we're including all the stakeholders. Establish goals, small checkpoints along the way. Because if you just look at this goal 100 miles away, it's easy to get discouraged. But if you have those small checkpoints, it keeps you going. And finally, have a person or a team to oversee that strategy. maybe a team with people from different levels of the organization so you can get that constant feedback from different levels. And most importantly, of course, what I always like to say, abide by the platinum rule. We've heard of the golden rule, treat others like we'd like to be treated. The platinum rule, I'd say, goes one beyond. Treat others the way they want to be treated. Let's find out what people need, how they want to be treated, and do our best to treat them that way. Treat them with respect, include them in the workplace, and make sure that they feel like they belong. And with that, that wraps up our presentation. I'll open it up if we have any questions floating around out there. In the meantime, though, I will remind you all, we do have that hotline for Alameda County employers, 888-202-5668. Give us a call Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We are closed on some holidays, but call us anyways. You can always leave us a message and we will get right back to you. Um, I'll also put up the screen with the training codes for anybody with continuing education credits. For HRCI, we have 662309. And for SHRM, we have 24-Q7 GUV. It's 24-Q7 Gov. Don't forget that dash, or SHRM will be very, very upset with you. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Stephanie, to take us home. I'll bring up the next slide for us as well.
Thank you so much, Eli. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning for this presentation on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. As I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, we would love your feedback on this presentation. Snap a picture of the QR code on your screen. The survey won't take you more than a couple of minutes, and we would love to get your feedback, help us improve our presentations moving forward. Tell Eli what a great job he did. He loves all the compliments. He's constantly fishing for them. And this presentation was recorded, so if you would like to go back and look at it or direct anybody else to it, and it will appear on the Alameda County Workforce Development Board's website in a little bit. All right, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we will talk to you later. Have a great day.